Under the glaring city lights, a millionaire's life of control collides with the quiet defiance of a woman on the streets. A reckless decision binds their worlds. But as secrets unravel, nothing will prepare him for what's about to come. Beverly Hills glistened under the Californian night, its wealth on full display. Ethan Montgomery's marble mansion stood like a modern palace, with its pristine gardens and an infinity pool reflecting the glow of the city lights. Inside, laughter echoed as his closest friends sipped champagne and swapped stories of their extravagant lives. Ethan, the unchallenged star of the evening, reveled in the adoration. "Everything has a price," he declared, raising his glass with a smug grin. His words carried the weight of someone who had never faced rejection. His friends, a group of equally privileged elites, nodded in agreement, fueling his arrogance. Ryan Harper, Ethan's sharp-tongued confidant, leaned in with a gleam of mischief. "If you're so sure about that, why not marry someone completely beneath you? Show us your money really can buy anything." The room erupted in laughter, but Ethan remained calm. His ego, fueled by years of unchecked privilege, wouldn't let him back down. "Fine, I'll do it," he said with a smirk. "Not only will I marry her, but I'll make her the kind of person Beverly Hills worships." The air buzzed with excitement as the group toasted to the outrageous bet. For Ethan, this wasn't just a game. It was an opportunity to prove his superiority. After all, what was life without the thrill of winning? The following morning, Ethan found himself cruising through Venice Beach in his sleek sports car. The vibrant chaos of the boardwalk stood in stark contrast to the polished perfection of Beverly Hills. Street performers, tourists, and the homeless mingled under the warm sun, creating a tapestry of energy and struggle. Ethan parked near a cafe and scanned the scene, his mind set on the challenge. His gaze landed on her. Sitting on a worn bench, Lena Taylor stared into the distance. Her clothes were frayed, her posture straight, and her eyes held an unyielding strength that defied her circumstances. Ethan approached with calculated confidence. "I have a proposition for you," he began. "Marry me." Lena's head tilted, her expression a mix of surprise and amusement. "That's a joke, right? I'm serious." "I can change your life," he replied, unwavering. Ethan wasn't used to resistance, but Lena's calm defiance intrigued him. After a long conversation, Lena finally agreed, but only on her terms: respect, honesty, and no games. Ethan accepted, certain that his money and charm could win any battle. What he didn't realize was that this wasn't just a game. For the first time in his life, Ethan had stepped into a world he couldn't control. Las Vegas was alive with neon lights and chaotic energy as Ethan and Lena arrived at a chapel that promised quick and easy weddings. The scene felt surreal. Flashing signs, tourists in loud outfits, and the endless hum of slot machines spilling into the streets. Ethan, dressed in an expensive suit, stood out like a diamond in the rough. Lena, in her worn jacket and jeans, seemed an unlikely companion. Ethan's friends had followed them, filling the small chapel with muffled laughter and whispers. They saw the event as nothing more than a bizarre spectacle, a stunt to feed their egos. Ethan's confidence remained unshaken as he turned to Lena. "Let's get this over with." Lena, her face unreadable, nodded and followed him down the aisle. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice blending with the murmurs of Ethan's friends. When the moment came to exchange vows, Lena spoke clearly, her voice steady. "I promise to hold you to your word." The weight of her words unsettled Ethan for a moment, but he quickly brushed it off. The rings were exchanged, and with a swift declaration, they were pronounced husband and wife. The room erupted in half-hearted applause, with Ryan leading the charge in mockery. As they stepped out into the glittering night, Ethan glanced at Lena, expecting her to falter. Instead, she held her head high, her calm defiance intact. For Ethan, it was just another victory. For Lena, it was the beginning of something far more significant. Back in Beverly Hills, the fallout began immediately. News of Ethan Montgomery's shocking wedding spread like wildfire, plastered across tabloids and gossip blogs. "Billionaire marries a beggar," screamed the headlines, accompanied by photos of Lena in her mismatched clothes and stoic expression. Ethan lounged in his sleek living room, scrolling through the relentless coverage. His phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues, some amused, others outraged. He smirked. "Let them talk," he muttered, dismissing the chaos. To him, the attention only solidified his daring persona. Lena, meanwhile, explored the vast mansion she now called home. The sprawling estate felt cold and impersonal, more like a museum than a place to live. She passed by walls adorned with abstract art and hallways that stretched endlessly. Despite the luxury, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. When Ethan joined her for dinner that evening, the tension between them was palpable. "Enjoying your new life?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of wine. Lena met his gaze, unflinching. "It's not what I expected, but I've been through worse." Her words were a challenge Ethan didn't know how to meet. He was used to people being impressed, intimidated, or both. Lena's calm resilience only deepened the mystery surrounding her. For the first time, Ethan wondered if he'd underestimated his new wife. The next day, Ethan decided to introduce Lena to his circle of friends. Hosting an intimate dinner at an exclusive Beverly Hills restaurant, he carefully curated the guest list. People who could appreciate the absurdity of his recent gamble. Ethan arrived with Lena by his side, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress he bought for her. The dress fit well, but Lena's lack of jewelry and minimal makeup made her stand out in the worst way among the polished crowd. The evening started as expected. His friends greeted him warmly, but their gazes lingered on Lena with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Ryan, as always, took the lead in breaking the ice with sarcasm. "So, this is the new Mrs. Montgomery. Quite the upgrade." Ethan laughed, brushing it off, but Lena remained unfazed. She responded, her voice calm and clear. "I didn't realize I was part of a ranking system." The table fell silent. Ethan's smirk faltered, surprised by her quick wit. The tension eased slightly when the conversation turned to lighter topics, but the unease never completely lifted. Lena's composure was unshaken throughout the night, even as subtle jabs were thrown her way. When they returned home, Ethan found himself more curious than ever. Lena wasn't defensive or emotional. She'd faced the evening with a poise he hadn't expected. For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of admiration for the woman he thought he could control. Over the following weeks, Lena began to carve out her own rhythm in the mansion. She spent mornings walking the expansive gardens and afternoons reading in the library. Ethan noticed her gravitation toward books about business and art, which only added to the puzzle of who she truly was. The media frenzy around their marriage refused to die down. Every outing was documented, every detail scrutinized. Lena, however, remained indifferent, refusing to engage with the tabloids or explain herself. Her stoicism frustrated Ethan, who was used to controlling narratives. One afternoon, Ethan invited her to a charity gala, an annual event for Beverly Hills elites. He expected her to refuse, but to his surprise, Lena agreed. That evening, she wore another dress he'd chosen, her elegance simple yet striking. As they entered the ballroom, whispers rippled through the crowd. The elite attendees scanned her from head to toe, their judgment clear. During the event, Ethan was drawn into conversations with potential investors, leaving Lena alone at their table. But instead of shrinking under the scrutiny, she engaged with those who approached her, discussing art and literature with surprising depth. Even the most skeptical guests seemed taken aback. When Ethan returned, he found her holding court with a small group. Her intelligence and charm were undeniable, yet her humility disarmed them. Later that night, as they drove home, Ethan glanced at her, a nagging thought forming in his mind. Lena wasn't just enduring his world, she was mastering it. As the days passed, Ethan began noticing small details about Lena that didn't add up. Her posture was always impeccable, and she navigated his mansion with an ease that seemed unnatural for someone new to such luxury. She never appeared overwhelmed or intimidated by his world, which only deepened his curiosity. One evening, Ethan returned home earlier than expected and found Lena in the library, deeply engrossed in a book about economic theories. Startled, she quickly closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. "Interesting choice," Ethan remarked, his tone light but probing. Lena offered a faint smile, avoiding his gaze. "You're full of surprises," he continued, stepping closer. "First, you impress my friends with your knowledge of art, and now this?" "People are always more than they seem," she replied calmly, before excusing herself. Ethan stood in the library, staring at the bookshelf, a nagging feeling growing stronger. Later that night, he searched for answers online, but found nothing of note about Lena Taylor. She was a mystery, a fact that simultaneously frustrated and fascinated him. For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't just a bet anymore. He wanted to understand her. The tension between Ethan and Lena continued to simmer, neither fully addressing the growing unease. The media, however, was relentless. Tabloids dissected every detail of their lives, and rumors about Lena's past began circulating. Some claimed she was hiding a scandal, while others suggested she was a gold digger. Ethan's frustration boiled over one evening when Ryan forwarded him an article accusing Lena of being an opportunist. "You're losing control of the narrative, Ethan," Ryan warned smugly. "Fix it before it costs you." Fueled by anger and confusion, Ethan confronted Lena. "Who are you really? And what are you hiding?" Lena met his gaze steadily. "I don't owe you an explanation, Ethan. You didn't marry me for who I am. You married me for a game." Her words struck a nerve. Ethan expected defensiveness or an emotional outburst, but her calm demeanor left him rattled. As Lena walked away, Ethan was left with more questions than answers. That night, for the first time, he began to doubt whether he was truly in control of the situation. It wasn't just about the bet anymore. It was about her, this enigmatic woman who seemed to carry the weight of secrets he couldn't yet unravel. The next evening, Ethan attended a high-profile corporate event with Lena by his side. The ballroom was filled with influential figures, investors, CEOs, and philanthropists, all eager to dissect his every move. As they entered, the buzz was palpable. Ethan's controversial marriage had become the talk of the elite, and tonight, all eyes were on Lena. Lena's calm composure was unshaken despite the whispers. She moved gracefully, her subtle elegance standing out in a sea of extravagance. Ethan watched her with curiosity, unsure whether to be impressed or irritated by her resilience. For someone so new to this world, she seemed to handle it better than most. During the event, Ethan left Lena momentarily to join a discussion with potential investors. When he returned, he found her in deep conversation with an elderly philanthropist, discussing a rare painting displayed in the venue. The man seemed captivated by Lena's insights, nodding with approval. As they left the event, Ethan broke the silence in the car. "Where did you learn so much about art?" Lena glanced at him briefly. "Life teaches you a lot if you're willing to pay attention." Her cryptic response left Ethan unsatisfied, but he chose not to press further. For now, Lena remained an enigma, one he was determined to unravel. By now, the media frenzy surrounding their marriage had reached a boiling point. Headlines ranged from speculation about Lena's past to critiques of Ethan's decision-making. His publicist warned him that the scandal was starting to affect the company's reputation. Investors were asking questions, and Ethan was running out of excuses. Meanwhile, Lena remained indifferent to the noise. She spent her days in the mansion's gardens or buried in books, avoiding both the press and Ethan's growing frustration. Her lack of concern only irritated him further. "Do you even care what people are saying about us?" he demanded one morning. Lena met his glare with a calmness that unnerved him. "Why should I? Their opinions don't define me." Ethan scoffed. "Easy for you to say. It's my name on the line." "Then maybe you should stop worrying about what they think and start asking why it bothers you so much," she replied before walking away. Her words lingered in his mind long after she left the room. Ethan hated admitting it, but she was right. For the first time, he began questioning why he cared so deeply about the image he'd spent years cultivating. Lena's ability to remain unshaken by external judgment was something he couldn't understand, and perhaps deep down envied. Ethan couldn't shake the growing curiosity about Lena. She moved through his world with a calm defiance that both frustrated and fascinated him. Over the following days, he began to notice her habits. Her morning walks in the garden, her afternoons in the library, and the quiet confidence with which she carried herself. One evening, Ethan found her in the library again, engrossed in a book about global economies. He lingered in the doorway, watching her fingers glide over the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. Clearing his throat, he stepped inside. "You have an interesting taste in reading." Lena looked up, unbothered. "Knowledge is free, last I checked." Her response was pointed, but there was a hint of humor in her tone. Ethan picked up the book she'd set aside and studied the title. "You're full of surprises, Lena." "People usually are," she replied, standing to leave, "if you bother to look." Ethan was left alone in the quiet library, her words echoing in his mind. That night, as he scrolled through endless articles and interviews, he realized just how little he knew about the woman he'd married. Lena wasn't a pawn in his game. She was playing a game of her own. The pressure from the media and Ethan's circle of friends continued to mount. Speculation about Lena's past was relentless, with tabloids publishing everything from fabricated scandals to wild theories about her identity. The noise became impossible to ignore. At dinner one evening, Ethan finally broke. "Do you even care about clearing your name?" he asked, exasperated. "People think you're some kind of scam artist." Lena looked at him with quiet intensity. "I don't live my life for the approval of strangers." Ethan leaned forward. "You're not just affecting your life, Lena. This is my reputation too." Lena's calm demeanor never wavered. "You chose this. You wanted the spotlight, Ethan. Now you have it. What's the problem?" Her words hit him harder than he expected. Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to control every narrative, but Lena had turned his world upside down. She was unapologetically herself, indifferent to the opinions that consumed him. For the first time, Ethan questioned the bet that had seemed so trivial when it started. Lena wasn't who he'd imagined, and maybe, just maybe, neither was he. Ethan's circle of friends began to grow restless. Ryan Harper, always eager to stir trouble, voiced what others wouldn't. "You've lost control, Ethan," he said during a private lunch. "Your wife is making you look weak. People are talking." Ethan shrugged, feigning indifference. "Let them talk." But Ryan wasn't convinced. "This isn't just gossip. Investors are questioning your judgment. A man like you can't afford to look reckless." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "I can handle my business." Ryan smirked. "Can you? Because from where I'm standing, Lena's winning whatever game she's playing." Ethan dismissed Ryan's words, but they stuck with him. That evening, at another lavish event, Lena's presence drew more scrutiny. She didn't shrink under the judgmental gazes or whispered remarks. Instead, she navigated the room with her usual poise, engaging those who dared to approach her. At one point, Ethan overheard Lena in conversation with an art collector. Her insight was sharp, her tone confident. The collector was visibly impressed, while Ethan watched from a distance, torn between admiration and frustration. Ryan's words echoed in his mind. Was Lena truly winning this game? The breaking point came during a charity gala hosted by one of Ethan's oldest friends. The event was filled with Beverly Hills elite, each more eager than the last to dissect Ethan and Lena's unconventional marriage. Lena walked into the grand ballroom on Ethan's arm, her simple elegance contrasting sharply with the extravagance around her. Whispers followed her every step. A group of women, led by Amanda Brooks, waited like predators ready to strike. "So, Lena," Amanda began, her tone dripping with faux politeness, "tell us, What's it like to go from nothing to all this? The question drew chuckles from the group. Lena didn't flinch. Humbling, she replied evenly. It's a good reminder that appearances aren't everything. Amanda's smile faltered, but she pressed on. I suppose you're still adjusting. Beverly Hills can be intimidating. Lena met her gaze. Intimidating? No, just predictable. The room grew quiet as Lena's words hung in the air. Amanda, visibly irritated, muttered something under her breath and walked away. Ethan, who had been watching from across the room, felt an unfamiliar sense of pride. Lena had faced the wolves and left them disarmed. Later that night, Ethan approached her. You didn't have to hold your ground like that. Lena glanced at him. Yes, I did. That's what people like them respect, strength. For the first time, Ethan began to see Lena not as an anomaly, but as someone who understood his world better than he did. Ethan couldn't stop replaying the scene from the gala in his mind. Lena had stood her ground with a grace that disarmed Amanda Brooks and left the room speechless. It wasn't just her words. It was the way she carried herself, unshaken by the judgment of people who thrived on tearing others down. Ethan was used to controlling every aspect of his life, but Lena had proven, time and again, that she was beyond his grasp. The next morning, he found himself scrolling through the headlines, expecting another round of tabloid speculation. Instead, there were whispers of admiration for Lena's performance at the gala. The mysterious Mrs. Montgomery. One headline read, accompanied by a candid photo of her smiling faintly in the ballroom. Ethan smirked. Lena, it seemed, was changing the narrative. As Ethan left for his office, Ryan called. Saw the news, Ryan began, his tone laced with annoyance. She's making you look good for now. But don't forget, Ethan, people love a fall from grace. Keep her in check. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. You don't know her, Ryan. She's not what you think. Ryan chuckled. You're right, I don't. But do you? Ethan ended the call without responding. Ryan's words gnawed at him. Did he know Lena at all? She'd been in his home for weeks, but every day, she seemed to reveal another layer he hadn't anticipated. He thought back to their first meeting, her unwavering gaze as she agreed to marry him. What had she been thinking then? What was she thinking now? That evening, Ethan tried to engage Lena in conversation during dinner. You surprised everyone at the gala last night. Did I? Lena replied, her tone neutral as she sipped her tea. You knew exactly what to say. I know people like Amanda. Their power is rooted in perception. It's easy to disarm them when you understand that. Ethan leaned back, studying her. Where did you learn all this? Lena's eyes flicked up to meet his. From watching people like you. Her words lingered in the air, both a revelation and a challenge. Ethan realized he wasn't just intrigued. He was deeply unsettled. The tension between Ethan and Lena grew more palpable with each passing day. Ethan, a man accustomed to dominance in every relationship, found himself increasingly thrown off balance by his wife. Lena was an enigma, and the more he observed her, the more questions arose. One evening, Ethan hosted a business dinner at the mansion, inviting top investors and executives. It was an important night, one that could determine the future of a lucrative deal. Lena, despite Ethan's reservations, insisted on joining. You invited me into your world, remember? She said when he hesitated. Dressed in a sleek, understated gown, Lena entered the dining room alongside Ethan, instantly drawing attention. The executives were visibly intrigued by her, though some masked their interest with polite indifference. As the evening progressed, Lena seamlessly joined the conversations, offering insights that surprised even Ethan. At one point, the discussion turned to an upcoming market expansion. Ethan watched, stunned, as Lena outlined potential risks and opportunities with a precision that silenced the room. You've done your homework, one of the investors remarked, clearly impressed. I've lived through enough to understand how systems work, Lena replied cryptically, her calm demeanor never faltering. After the guests left, Ethan confronted her. You were incredible tonight, but you're not just guessing, are you? You've been in this world before. Lena paused, her gaze steady. I've seen it from both sides, the winners and the losers. Ethan pressed on. Why won't you tell me who you really are? Because you didn't marry me to know me, she said quietly. You married me to win a bet. Her words cut deep, leaving Ethan speechless. As she walked away, he was left to grapple with a reality he could no longer ignore. Lena was playing a game far more complex than he'd anticipated. Ethan couldn't shake the conversation with Lena from his mind. She was right. He hadn't married her to understand her, but now he couldn't stop trying. Every interaction with her left him with more questions than answers, and the frustration of being out of control was eating at him. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself observing Lena more closely. Her habits, her routines, the way she interacted with people, all of it was intentional, deliberate. She was careful with her words and actions, revealing just enough to maintain her mysterious allure. It was a skill Ethan recognized, one honed in the world of power and influence. One afternoon, while searching for a file in his office, Ethan came across an envelope addressed to Lena. It was unopened, the return address unfamiliar. Against his better judgment, he stared at it for a moment, debating whether to hand it to her or open it himself. The temptation was strong, but he ultimately left it untouched. That evening, during dinner, Ethan brought it up. You received some mail today, he said casually, gauging her reaction. Lena looked at him with calm curiosity. Mail? That's rare. He placed the envelope on the table between them. From someone named Grace Taylor. Lena's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. She picked up the envelope and set it aside without opening it. Thank you. Ethan leaned forward. Aren't you going to see what it says? Not tonight, Lena replied, her tone final. Some things are better left unopened. Her response only deepened Ethan's curiosity. He wanted to push further, to demand answers, but something in her demeanor stopped him. Lena was guarding something, and Ethan was beginning to wonder if he was truly ready for the truth. The following week, Ethan faced mounting pressure at work. The company was preparing for a major acquisition, and every move was being scrutinized by the board and investors. On top of that, the media frenzy surrounding his marriage refused to die down, adding an unwelcome layer of stress to his already packed schedule. Lena, meanwhile, continued to move quietly through his world. While Ethan worked late nights, she spent her time in the mansion's library or gardens, seemingly unbothered by the chaos surrounding them. Yet every so often, she would offer an observation or suggestion that caught Ethan off guard. One evening, as he pored over reports in his office, Lena appeared in the doorway. You look like you've been fighting fires all day, she remarked, leaning against the frame. Something like that, Ethan muttered, not looking up. Lena walked in and glanced at the papers strewn across his desk. You're overcomplicating it, she said, pointing to a specific section of the report. The risks you're worried about are manageable if you adjust the terms here. Ethan frowned, glancing at the section she indicated. How do you know that? Because I've seen deals like this before, Lena replied, her tone matter-of-fact. Ethan studied her for a moment, then turned back to the report. She was right. The adjustment she suggested made sense. You're full of surprises, he said, leaning back in his chair. People usually are, Lena replied with a faint smile. If you bothered to notice. Her words struck a chord. Ethan had spent so much time focused on appearances, on controlling perceptions, that he'd rarely taken the time to truly see the people around him. As Lena left the room, Ethan found himself wondering just how much more he'd overlooked. Ethan's world was spinning out of control, and Lena continued to be the one enigma he couldn't solve. The media, still relentless, had shifted their focus to uncovering Lena's past. Rumors swirled about her, ranging from tragic to scandalous. Some speculated she had a criminal record. Others claimed she was the illegitimate child of a billionaire. Ryan seized the opportunity to plant doubt in Ethan's mind. "This marriage is becoming a liability," he said during a tense phone call. "The board is starting to question whether you're fit to lead." Ethan's voice was sharp. "What's your point, Ryan?" "My point is that Lena is dragging you down. The sooner you cut ties, the better for everyone." Ethan hung up without responding, his frustration boiling over. He didn't need Ryan to tell him what was at stake. The company, his reputation, his carefully cultivated image. Everything felt precariously balanced on the edge of chaos. That evening, Ethan confronted Lena in the library, where she had taken to spending most of her time. "Do you know what they're saying about you?" he demanded. Lena looked up from her book, her expression calm but unreadable. "I don't concern myself with gossip." "It's not just gossip," Ethan snapped. "It's affecting my business, my life. Don't you care?" Lena closed the book and set it aside. "Of course I care. But I've learned that people will believe what they want to believe. Trying to fight it only gives them more power." Ethan stared at her, his anger fading into something closer to admiration. Despite the storm raging around her, Lena remained unshaken. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving in a way Ethan couldn't comprehend. For the first time, Ethan wondered if Lena's strength might be the key to weathering the storm they now faced together. The tension between Ethan and Lena reached a breaking point when a new scandal broke. A gossip column published an expose claiming that Lena's family had been destroyed by unethical practices linked to Ethan's company. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media and the business world. Ethan's phone didn't stop buzzing. Investors demanded explanations, and the board called for an emergency meeting. The pressure was immense, and Ethan felt the weight of it all bearing down on him. At home, Lena was unusually quiet. When Ethan finally approached her, she met his gaze with a calm intensity. "Is it true?" she asked simply. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. It's possible, but I had nothing to do with it." Lena nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I thought so." Her response caught Ethan off guard. "What do you mean?" "I've suspected for a long time that your family's company was involved in what happened to mine," she admitted. "But I didn't marry you for revenge, Ethan. I married you because I wanted to see if there was still humanity behind the empire." Ethan was stunned. For weeks, he had been trying to figure out Lena's motives, only to discover she had been testing him all along. "And what do you think now?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Lena's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp. "I think you're capable of more than you realize. But the question is whether you'll choose to do the right thing." Her words left Ethan speechless. As she walked away, he realized that the bet he had made was no longer about proving his power. It was about proving his worth, not just to Lena but to himself. Ethan spent the next few days grappling with Lena's revelation. The idea that his family's company could have contributed to the destruction of hers was both unsettling and infuriating. He reviewed old business records, searching for any evidence of wrongdoing. What he found shocked him. Hidden among the files were documents outlining a series of acquisitions that had led to the collapse of smaller companies, including one that matched Lena's description. Ethan felt a mix of guilt and anger. He hadn't been directly involved, but this was his family's legacy. The empire he had inherited wasn't as clean as he had always believed. That evening, he sat across from Lena at dinner, the weight of his discovery pressing heavily on him. "You were right," he admitted, breaking the silence. "My family's company played a role in what happened to yours." Lena looked up, her expression calm but guarded. "And now you know." "I didn't know," Ethan said, his voice quieter. "Not until now." Lena sighed, setting down her fork. "Ethan, this isn't about assigning blame. It's about accountability. What matters is what you do with this knowledge." Her words struck a nerve. Ethan realized she wasn't interested in revenge. She wanted him to face the truth and take responsibility. It was a lesson he hadn't expected, and it left him feeling both humbled and determined. For the first time, Ethan saw a path forward, not as a man clinging to his image, but as someone who could make things right. And he knew that Lena, the woman he had underestimated from the beginning, was a catalyst for this transformation. Ethan's newfound determination was immediately tested when Ryan and other board members called an emergency meeting to address the scandal. The media frenzy had reached its peak, with headlines accusing Ethan of covering up his family's questionable business practices. Investors were demanding answers, and the board wanted him to act swiftly to protect the company. At the meeting, Ryan wasted no time laying out his plan. We need to distance ourselves from Lena. Publicly, issue a statement, end the marriage, and shift the narrative back in our favor. Ethan stared at him, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Everything Ryan said made sense from a business perspective. But as he glanced at the other board members, he realized something important. He didn't want to take the easy way out. For years, he had lived for their approval, but now he saw the cost of doing so. "I'm not ending the marriage," Ethan said firmly. The room fell silent. Ryan's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Ethan." "Maybe," Ethan replied, "but it's mine to make." The meeting ended with tension thick in the air. Back at the mansion, Lena was waiting for him. Ethan told her about the meeting and his decision to stand by her. "This isn't just about you," he said. "It's about me being the kind of person I can respect." For the first time, Lena's expression softened into something warmer. "Then you've already won more than you realize." Her words stayed with Ethan long after she left the room. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path, not just for his company, but for himself. The fallout from Ethan's decision was immediate. Ryan wasted no time sowing discord among the board, positioning himself as the voice of reason against Ethan's reckless leadership. Investors were divided, with some supporting Ethan's stand, while others expressed concerns about his judgment. The media continued to fan the flames, speculating on the internal turmoil within the company. Ethan, however, remained resolute. He spent hours strategizing with his legal and PR teams, crafting a plan to address the scandal head-on. Lena's presence during this time was quiet but steady. She didn't offer unsolicited advice, but her calm demeanor and occasional observations gave Ethan a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Ethan found Lena in the garden. She was sitting on a stone bench, staring at the stars. He hesitated before approaching, unsure if she wanted company. "You're fighting an uphill battle," she said without looking at him. "I know," he replied, sitting beside her, "but I've made my choice." Lena turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Why?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Because for once, I want to do what's right. Not what's easy, not what's expected, just what's right." For the first time, Lena's stoic facade cracked, and a flicker of warmth appeared in her eyes. Then maybe this marriage wasn't such a mistake after all. Her words, simple as they were, filled Ethan with a renewed sense of purpose. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't fighting it alone. Ethan's decision to stand by Lena sparked a ripple effect within the company. Some board members, inspired by his courage, began to shift their stance, supporting his vision for transparency and ethical reform. Others, like Ryan, doubled down on their opposition, determined to see Ethan fail. At the next board meeting, tensions were at an all-time high. Ryan arrived with a folder of documents, which he placed dramatically on the table. "This," he announced, "is what happens when you let personal emotions cloud your professional judgment." He opened the folder, revealing what he claimed were damning records connecting Lena to shady business dealings. Gasps filled the room as Ryan laid out his case. Ethan remained silent, his gaze steady on Ryan. When Ryan finished, Ethan stood. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Lena has nothing to hide, and unlike you, I'm not going to let lies dictate my actions." Ryan smirked. "Then prove it." Ethan took a deep breath, glancing at the board members. "I've reviewed every record, every transaction. And yes, mistakes were made. But this company isn't defined by its past. It's defined by how we move forward." The room fell silent as Ethan continued. We have a choice. To be a company that hides behind its mistakes or one that faces them head-on and learns from them. I choose the latter. Lena, who had quietly entered the room, stepped forward. And I'm here to do the same, she said, her voice steady. I'm not your enemy. I'm someone who knows what it feels like to lose everything because of greed and arrogance. And I want to help ensure that doesn't happen to anyone else. Her words resonated, and the room seemed to shift. Ethan glanced at her, gratitude in his eyes. Together, they were rewriting the story, not just of their marriage, but of their lives. The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted after Lena spoke. Her calm and genuine demeanor had struck a chord, even among those who had doubted her. Ethan seized the moment. This is our opportunity to rebuild, he said, addressing the room, to prove that we are more than the mistakes of the past. The board members murmured among themselves, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan saw glimmers of support from some of his staunchest critics. Ryan, however, wasn't ready to back down. Words are cheap, Ethan, he said with a smirk. Let's see how long your integrity lasts when the profits start to dip. Ethan met Ryan's gaze without flinching. Integrity is worth more than short-term gains. If we lose money doing the right thing, so be it. I'd rather lead a company I can be proud of. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan felt a mix of relief and tension. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was beginning to turn. Lena stayed behind with him as the others filed out. You didn't have to defend me, she said softly. Yes, I did, Ethan replied, because you're right. Accountability matters. Lena studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then let's make sure we do this right. That evening, Ethan sat in his study, going over plans to implement more ethical practices within the company. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond maintaining his image or winning a bet. Lena's influence had challenged him to be better, and he was determined not to let her down or himself. Ethan and Lena began working together more closely, and their partnership didn't go unnoticed. The media started spinning a new narrative, portraying Lena as the force behind Ethan's transformation. The Montgomery Redeemer. One headline read, accompanied by a photo of the two walking out of the boardroom together. While some praised the couple for their efforts to clean up the company's practices, others, particularly Ryan, saw it as an opportunity to exploit. He began quietly reaching out to investors, sowing seeds of doubt about Ethan's leadership. He's letting sentiment cloud his judgment, Ryan told them. It's only a matter of time before it all falls apart. Ethan, unaware of Ryan's scheming, focused on the changes Lena had inspired. Together, they drafted plans for a new initiative aimed at supporting small businesses, an acknowledgement of the harm caused by previous acquisitions. Lena's insights were invaluable, her understanding of the struggles faced by smaller companies offering a perspective Ethan hadn't considered. One night, as they reviewed their proposal in the library, Ethan paused. Why are you doing this? He asked. You could have walked away from all of this. Why stay? Lena looked at him thoughtfully. Because I see potential. For you, for this company, for something better. And because I believe that even the worst mistakes can lead to something good if you're willing to learn from them. Her words stayed with Ethan long after she retired for the night. For the first time, he began to see their partnership not as an obligation, but as a chance to build something meaningful. Together, Ryan's quiet scheming began to take shape. He convened a secret meeting with several key investors, painting Ethan's leadership as reckless and driven by sentimentality. He's risking the company's future for a PR stunt, Ryan argued, showing carefully selected financial projections to bolster his case. We need decisive leadership, not someone distracted by his personal life. The investors exchanged wary glances. Some nodded in agreement, swayed by Ryan's confident presentation. Others hesitated, reluctant to undermine Ethan just yet. Sensing their indecision, Ryan pressed on. If we wait too long, it'll be too late. We need to act now. Meanwhile, Ethan remained focused on pushing forward with the changes he and Lena had planned. At a public event to unveil their new initiative supporting small businesses, Ethan stood on stage alongside Lena. The crowd was mixed. Some applauded their efforts, while others murmured doubts about Ethan's sincerity. Lena spoke first, recounting her own experience of losing everything due to corporate greed. Her voice was steady, and her words resonated deeply with the audience. "This isn't just about fixing mistakes," she said. "It's about building a future where success doesn't come at the expense of others." Ethan followed, his tone earnest. "We can't undo the past, but we can learn from it. This initiative is a step toward creating a legacy we can all be proud of." As they left the stage, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The event had been a success, but he knew the challenges ahead would only grow. Back at the office, whispers of Ryan's rebellion began to reach him. Ethan knew he'd have to confront the betrayal soon, but first, he needed to ensure the foundation he and Lena were building remained strong. Ryan's plans came to a head when he called for an emergency board meeting, citing urgent concerns about the company's direction. Ethan, blindsided by the sudden summons, arrived to find the room filled with tense faces. Ryan wasted no time laying out his accusations. "Ethan has allowed personal emotions to dictate corporate decisions," Ryan began, his voice firm. "He's risking our financial stability for the sake of optics." Ethan listened, his expression calm, but his mind racing. Ryan produced financial projections that painted a grim picture, emphasizing potential losses from the new initiatives. "We need to vote on his continued leadership before it's too late," Ryan concluded. The room was silent, the weight of Ryan's words hanging heavily in the air. Ethan rose, his voice steady but firm. "This company has thrived on innovation and bold decisions. Yes, we've made mistakes, but doing the right thing isn't a liability. It's an investment in our future." He glanced around the room, meeting each board member's gaze. "If you want a leader who plays it safe, then maybe I'm not the right person. But if you want someone who's willing to fight for something bigger than just profit margins, then I'm exactly who you need." Ryan smirked, confident he'd swayed enough votes. But before the board could proceed, Lena entered the room. "If you're going to decide his fate, you should hear the whole story," she said, her voice unwavering. She detailed the new initiatives and their long-term benefits, countering Ryan's claims with precise data. Her clarity and conviction shifted the tone of the meeting. Some board members began nodding, their skepticism softening. When the vote finally came, Ethan's leadership narrowly survived. Ryan left the room in defeat, his anger barely concealed. Ethan and Lena exchanged a glance. Victory was theirs, but the battle was far from over. The aftermath of the board meeting left the company in a fragile state. While Ethan had retained his leadership, the narrow margin of the vote revealed deep divisions within the board. Ryan's departure was a temporary victory, but Ethan knew his former ally wouldn't give up so easily. Ryan had influence, and his resentment made him dangerous. Ethan poured himself into solidifying the new initiatives with Lena's help. Together, they refined plans for the Small Business Support Program, ensuring transparency and long-term sustainability. Lena's insights proved invaluable, her understanding of systemic inequalities guiding their strategy. Ethan found himself relying on her in ways he hadn't anticipated, not just professionally but personally. Their partnership began to shift subtly. Late nights in the office turned into candid conversations about their pasts. Ethan shared stories of his upbringing, how the pressure to uphold his family's legacy had shaped him into the man he was. Lena, in turn, revealed glimpses of her life before everything fell apart. Her vulnerability surprised Ethan, deepening his respect for her. Meanwhile, the media narrative began to change. Headlines now painted Ethan as a bold leader willing to risk everything for integrity. Lena, once vilified, was being hailed as the heart behind his transformation. Public support grew, but not everyone was convinced. Investors who had sided with Ryan remained skeptical, watching closely for any misstep. One evening, as Ethan and Lena reviewed the latest progress report, he paused and looked at her. You've done more for this company than most people who've been here for years. Why didn't you walk away when you had the chance? Lena met his gaze, her expression soft but resolute. Because I believed you could be better, and I wasn't ready to give up on that. Ethan nodded, her words sinking in. For the first time, he felt like he was becoming the person she believed he could be. Despite the progress they had made, Ethan and Lena knew their challenges were far from over. Ryan's departure had left a power vacuum, and other ambitious board members were quietly positioning themselves to fill it. Ethan also faced increasing pressure from external competitors who saw the company's transformation as a vulnerability to exploit. At a high-profile investor summit, Ethan and Lena presented their vision for the company's future. The room was filled with skepticism, but also a hint of curiosity. Ethan opened the presentation, speaking with passion about the need for ethical leadership and long-term growth. "We're not just building a company," he said. "We're building a legacy." Lena took over, outlining the specifics of their new initiatives. She spoke with confidence and clarity, addressing potential concerns head-on. Her ability to command the room surprised even Ethan, who watched as previously skeptical investors leaned in, nodding at her points. When the presentation ended, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. Ethan glanced at Lena, a mixture of pride and gratitude in his expression. Together, they had turned a moment of doubt into a victory. Later that night, as they walked through the city, Ethan felt a rare sense of peace. "You saved me tonight," he said quietly. Lena shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you what you were capable of." For the first time, Ethan realized how much they had changed, not just as individuals, but as a team. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing he didn't have to do it alone. The victory at the Investor Summit gave Ethan and Lena a renewed sense of momentum. The media, once hostile, now hailed them as pioneers of corporate reform. Headlines like Ethan Montgomery, from reckless heir to visionary leader, and Lena's influence, the woman who changed Montgomery Industries, dominated the news cycle. Yet, not everyone was celebrating. Behind closed doors, remnants of Ryan's influence lingered. A small but vocal faction of the board began questioning the feasibility of the changes Ethan and Lena were implementing. Their complaints centered on the potential costs of ethical reform and whether the company could maintain its competitive edge. Ethan, however, refused to back down. One evening, Lena found Ethan in his study, poring over financial reports with a furrowed brow. "You're letting them get to you," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Ethan sighed. "It's not just them. I'm trying to prove to everyone that this can work. Sometimes I'm not even sure I believe it myself." Lena knelt beside him, her gaze steady. "You're doing the right thing. That matters more than anything. People will follow if you lead with conviction." Her words, simple yet powerful, reignited his determination. Ethan knew that Lena's belief in him wasn't just about the company. It was about who he was becoming. Together, they decided to double down on their efforts, using every resource available to show that ethical leadership could yield tangible results. The next day, Ethan unveiled a public transparency report outlining the company's progress and future goals. The move was risky, exposing vulnerabilities that competitors could exploit. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. Investors and the public alike praised the bold approach, seeing it as a sign of genuine commitment to change. As the momentum grew, so did Ethan's resolve. He realized that true leadership wasn't about avoiding challenges, but facing them head-on with integrity. And with Lena by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. Ryan's retaliation came sooner than expected. From his new position at a rival company, he began orchestrating a smear campaign against Ethan and Lena. Leaks of internal documents and carefully planted rumors painted their reforms as unsustainable and deceptive. The media, always hungry for scandal, pounced on the story. Ethan's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from board members and investors demanding answers. The progress they had made seemed to hang by a thread. Ethan, however, refused to let panic dictate his actions. "We addressed this head-on," he told Lena during a late-night meeting. Together, they crafted a response. The next morning, Ethan held a press conference to address the accusations. Standing at the podium, with Lena seated behind him, he spoke with unwavering conviction. "Yes, we've made mistakes," he admitted. "But mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. We are committed to transparency, and that means owning up to our flaws while continuing to move forward." Lena followed, her calm voice cutting through the tension in the room. "These reforms aren't about saving face. They're about building a foundation for a better future. Doubt is natural, but progress requires risk. We're here to take that risk." Their authenticity struck a chord. The media coverage began to shift, with many praising their honesty and courage. Public opinion, once again, turned in their favor. Later that night, Ethan and Lena shared a quiet moment on the mansion's balcony. "We're still standing," Ethan said, a note of relief in his voice. "Because we're standing together," Lena replied. Ethan looked at her, gratitude and admiration in his eyes. "I never thought I'd say this, but I wouldn't be here without you." For the first time, Lena allowed a small smile to break through. "And I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in you." With the smear campaign losing momentum, Ethan turned his focus to securing the future of Montgomery Industries. He knew Ryan's departure had left scars, not just within the company, but also in the trust of key investors. To address these concerns, Ethan proposed an ambitious plan: a partnership with smaller, family-owned businesses to rebuild trust and foster goodwill. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some investors were excited by the fresh approach, while others saw it as a risky departure from the company's usual strategies. Ethan, however, stood firm. "If we want to thrive in the long term, we need to show that we're not just taking, we're giving back." Lena was instrumental in crafting the details of the initiative. She organized meetings with local business owners, listening to their concerns and incorporating their feedback into the proposal. Her hands-on approach impressed even the skeptics within the company, and Ethan found himself relying on her insights more than ever. One such meeting took place in a modest cafe owned by a family affected by a prior acquisition. The owners were hesitant at first, wary of Montgomery Industries' intentions. But as Lena spoke, sharing her own experiences and the vision for a more ethical future, their skepticism began to fade. "You've been through this, haven't you?" the cafe owner asked. Lena nodded. "I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know it's possible to rebuild, if someone's willing to help." By the end of the meeting, the cafe owners had agreed to partner with the company, marking a small but significant victory. As they left the cafe, Ethan turned to Lena. "You're the reason they said yes." Lena shook her head. "No, they said yes because they saw you mean what you're saying." For Ethan, it was another reminder of how much they had both changed and how much stronger they were as a team. The partnership initiative gained traction quickly. News outlets began covering Montgomery Industries' efforts to collaborate with smaller businesses, framing it as a bold and innovative move. The positive publicity reinvigorated investor confidence, and public sentiment continued to shift in Ethan's favor. Despite this progress, the pressure hadn't lessened. Ryan, bitter from his failed smear campaign, began working behind the scenes to sabotage the initiative. Using his connections, he convinced a few influential figures to publicly question the program's legitimacy. Claims of hidden motives and unsustainable practices began to surface, threatening to undermine the progress Ethan and Lena had made. During a heated board meeting, one member echoed these concerns. "This initiative is good PR, but can we afford it in the long term? What if it backfires?" Ethan leaned forward, his tone calm but resolute. "What we can't afford is to keep doing business as usual. The world is changing, and if we don't change with it, we'll be left behind." Lena added, her voice steady. "Skepticism is natural, but real progress takes time, and this initiative isn't just about short-term gains. It's about creating something sustainable." The meeting ended with cautious agreement, but the tension was clear. Ethan knew they couldn't afford another setback. Later that evening, Ethan and Lena worked late in his office, reviewing every detail of the initiative to ensure its success. As they finished, Ethan looked at Lena, exhaustion and gratitude in his eyes. "How do you stay so composed through all of this?" Lena smiled faintly. "Because I've already survived worse. This is just a challenge we can overcome." Her words reassured Ethan, reminding him of how far they'd come. Together, they were proving that change wasn't just possible, it was necessary. With the partnership initiative gaining traction, Ethan and Lena's efforts began to show tangible results. Several small businesses reported increased revenue and stability due to the program, and the media continued to shift the narrative in their favor. Montgomery Industries, a new era of responsibility, one headline read, marking a turning point in public perception. However, Ryan wasn't finished. He orchestrated a high-profile expose, accusing the initiative of being a superficial PR stunt. The article, published in a major outlet, highlighted cherry-picked data and anonymous sources to paint a picture of incompetence and manipulation. It was a calculated attack designed to undermine everything Ethan and Lena had built. The fallout was immediate. Investors demanded an emergency meeting, and the board was split once again. Ethan prepared for the worst, but Lena encouraged him to stay calm. "People will doubt us because change is uncomfortable," she said. "We need to meet this with honesty, not defensiveness." At the meeting, Ethan addressed the accusations head-on. "Yes, this initiative is bold, and yes, it's a risk. But nothing worthwhile is ever achieved without risk. The data speaks for itself. These partnerships are working. The real question isn't whether we can afford to continue. It's whether we can afford to stop." Lena followed, presenting detailed reports that dismantled the claims in Ryan's expose. Her precision and composure silenced even the harshest critics. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to move forward with the initiative, despite lingering concerns. Later that evening, as Ethan and Lena reviewed the day's events, he turned to her. "You've been the backbone of this entire process. I couldn't have done any of this without you." Lena smiled, her eyes softening. "You could have. You just needed a reason to try." Ethan realized then how much he'd grown, not just as a leader, but as a person. And he knew Lena had been the catalyst for that transformation. The success of the initiative brought a brief sense of stability, but Ethan and Lena both knew it was temporary. The corporate world was unforgiving, and their efforts had put a target on their backs. Ryan, though publicly quiet, was still maneuvering behind the scenes, leveraging every connection he had to destabilize Montgomery Industries. One morning, Ethan received a tip from a trusted ally. Ryan was planning a major move. He had convinced a powerful investor group to demand a vote of no confidence in Ethan's leadership, citing the financial risks of the new direction. The vote was scheduled for the following week, leaving Ethan little time to prepare. Lena stepped in immediately, working alongside Ethan to counter Ryan's influence. Together, they contacted key stakeholders, presenting a clear vision of the company's future and emphasizing the positive results of the partnership initiative. Ethan's passion and Lena's pragmatism proved to be a powerful combination. As the week progressed, tensions mounted. Ethan found himself questioning whether he had the strength to see this through. "What if they vote me out?" he asked Lena one night, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight back. No matter what happens, this isn't the end." Her confidence steadied him, and Ethan resolved to face the vote with everything he had. On the day of the meeting, he entered the boardroom with Lena by his side. The atmosphere was charged. The board members' expressions a mix of doubt and anticipation. Ethan addressed the room with unwavering determination. "This company was built on bold decisions. We've faced challenges before, and we'll face them again. But I believe in what we're building, and I believe in the people who make it possible." The vote began, each member casting their decision. As the final tally was announced, Ethan held his breath. The result was close, but he had won. Ryan's attempt to oust him had failed. After the meeting, Ethan turned to Lena, relief washing over him. "We did it." "No," Lena corrected, her voice soft but firm. "You did it. I just reminded you of who you are." Ethan's narrow victory over Ryan's no-confidence vote solidified his position as CEO, but the battle left him aware of the precarious nature of his leadership. The board support was conditional, and every decision he made would be scrutinized. Despite the pressure, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just protecting his title. He was building something meaningful. With Lena by his side, he focused on expanding the small business initiative. They met with more local entrepreneurs, listening to their needs and tailoring the program to address specific challenges. Each meeting strengthened the program's credibility, and Ethan began to see the ripple effects of their efforts. Businesses flourished, communities grew stronger, and Montgomery Industries' reputation steadily improved. However, Ryan's shadow loomed large. Though he had been removed from the company, his influence in the corporate world was undeniable. Rumors surfaced of his plans to launch a competing initiative, one that would undermine Ethan's work while positioning Ryan as the true visionary. The news fueled Ethan's resolve. During a late-night strategy session, Lena brought up an idea. What if we partner with organizations outside the corporate world? Nonprofits, community leaders, people who share our vision but don't have the resources we do. Ethan considered her suggestion, recognizing its potential to expand their reach. "It's ambitious," he admitted, "but I like it. Let's make it happen." The next morning, Ethan announced the expansion of the initiative, framing it as a collaborative effort between Montgomery Industries and grassroots organizations. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with media outlets praising the move as innovative and inclusive. As the momentum grew, Ethan and Lena shared a rare, quiet moment in the mansion's garden. "This feels different," Ethan said, his voice reflective. "Like we're actually making a difference." Lena nodded, her gaze on the horizon. "Because we are. And for the first time, it's not just about you or me. It's about something bigger." Ethan smiled, realizing how far they'd come. Together, they weren't just rebuilding a company. They were reshaping the legacy of Montgomery Industries and, in the process, redefining themselves. Ethan's collaborative expansion of the small business initiative brought unexpected allies. Nonprofits, community leaders, and advocacy groups eagerly joined forces with Montgomery Industries, creating a network that extended far beyond the company's original reach. The program became a model of corporate and community partnership, earning praise from even the harshest critics. Despite the success, Ethan remained cautious. Ryan's competing initiative launched with great fanfare, backed by a massive marketing campaign and significant corporate partnerships. It was a direct challenge to Ethan's efforts, and the media wasted no time framing the two as rivals. Ethan, however, refused to play into the narrative. "Let Ryan have his spotlight," he told Lena during a meeting with their team. "We're not competing with him. We're staying focused on our goals." Lena agreed, but she knew Ryan's presence couldn't be ignored entirely. "We just need to keep delivering results," she said. "Let the work speak for itself." Their patience paid off. Reports began emerging that Ryan's initiative was struggling to deliver on its promises. Small businesses complained of broken agreements and insufficient support, while former allies quietly distanced themselves from his operation. The contrast between his program and Ethan's became impossible to ignore. During a televised interview, Ethan was asked directly about Ryan's failures. Instead of capitalizing on the moment, he responded with measured grace. "Our focus has always been on creating meaningful change, not on competing with anyone else. I wish everyone the best in their efforts to make a difference." The response earned widespread respect, further solidifying Ethan's reputation as a leader with integrity. That evening, as they reviewed the day's events, Lena turned to him. "You could have taken him down." Ethan shook his head. "We don't need to. He's doing it to himself." For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of peace about the path they were on. Their work was making an impact, and no matter what obstacles remained, they were ready to face them together. Ethan's leadership continued to garner praise, and Montgomery Industries had become a symbol of corporate responsibility. The partnership initiative expanded further, with more businesses and community organizations joining the effort. Ethan felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before, but he knew there was still work to be done. Lena remained by his side, her influence quietly shaping every decision. The media, once skeptical of her role, now referred to her as the company's moral compass. While Ethan welcomed the positive attention, Lena remained reserved. "I didn't do this for recognition," she told him one evening. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Ethan admired her humility, but he also recognized the toll their journey had taken on her. The constant scrutiny, the public battles. It wasn't easy for either of them. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan suggested they take a weekend away. "We deserve a break," he said. "Just us. No board meetings, no media, no investors." Lena hesitated but eventually agreed. They escaped to a quiet coastal town, far from the chaos of their lives in Beverly Hills. Walking along the beach, Ethan opened up in a way he rarely did. "I never thought I could feel this way, like I'm finally doing something that matters." Lena smiled softly. "Because you are." As they watched the waves roll in, Ethan turned to her. "You've changed everything, Lena. Not just the company, but me." Lena looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sincerity of his words. "You changed yourself, Ethan. I just reminded you of who you could be." The weekend gave them both a much-needed reprieve, but it also reaffirmed their commitment to the work they had started. As they returned to the city, they knew the challenges weren't over, but they were ready to face them, together. The transformation of Montgomery Industries was complete. The company, once criticized for its greed and unethical practices, was now a leader in corporate responsibility. The small business initiative had grown into a national movement, inspiring other corporations to follow suit. At a gala celebrating the initiative's success, Ethan took the stage to deliver a speech. The room was filled with business leaders, community partners, and media representatives. As he looked out at the audience, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. "This isn't just a celebration of what we've achieved," he began. "It's a reminder of what's possible when we prioritize people over profits." The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan's eyes found Lena, standing at the back of the room. She gave him a small nod, her support as steady as ever. After the speech, Ethan joined her, a glass of champagne in hand. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "No," Lena replied with a smile. "You did it." Ethan shook his head. "We did it. Together." As the night went on, Ethan reflected on how far they had come. The bet that had started it all felt like a distant memory, a foolish gamble that had inadvertently set them on a path neither of them could have foreseen. What began as a challenge born of arrogance had turned into a journey of growth, redemption, and partnership. When the gala ended, Ethan and Lena stepped out into the crisp night air. "So, what's next?" Lena asked, her tone light but curious. Ethan smiled, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out, together." As they walked away, hand in hand, they left behind not just a legacy of change, but a story of transformation, one that would inspire others for years to come. Enjoy the story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next thrilling episode. See you in our next video. Take care.